Welcome to One Word Stories. My name is Joanna Zell, and my very precious guest is Yoav Goldwein. It's really amazing to have met him in the Alps in South Tyrol, which is Italy, because of one very, very important love for storytelling, especially visual storytelling. And all the visual stories Yoav is sharing are oscillating around the theme of feeling home, belonging, and he is the creator of a mobile exhibition between shelter and cage. A very warm welcome, Yoav.
Hello, happy to be here.
Yes, Yoav, this passion for storytelling, especially visual storytelling, and also the idea of, approaching the theme of feeling and sensing home in different cultures, from different perspectives. How did this journey start for you?
Oh, wow. I guess the journey started, like most things, from discomfort. I was finishing my master's in urbanism and decided after a very difficult year to take a little bit of a break and to go travel for a little while. I ended up traveling for almost 2 years, being a nomadic. And in a way, I think I was looking for an alternative way of living. I wasn't sure about the way that I was living my life. I was, for a few years already, I've been living in different parts of the world, experiencing different cultures. And I wasn't sure yet what is my sweet spot. What is that home that I can really like root myself into and feel comfortable and feel safe. So during my travels, I just looked for people who live in an alternative way. Um, and I met some really interesting people who live in really interesting conditions, from like an eco village in Mexico to a cave in Andalusia, or a boat in London, or on a lonely island. All of these stories were really fascinating to me. And I decided to record them, to write them down. First reason was because I have a really bad memory and I wanted to remember these stories. And second, because I wanted to analyze them. I realized that I speak to those people and they talk with me about this utopian idea of home that they had in mind and the place that they arrived to, but also about the demons they brought with them and the challenges. And I felt like there was some sort of a shadow side to this yearning to home. Um, Everybody are looking for this comfort, for this safety, for this feeling of rootness, but it comes with a price. So writing them down was a way to think more in a more balanced way about the different stories, bringing my own perspectives, reflecting on my own story, and come out with some sort of a conclusion of what was this conversation actually about. Was it about me, them finding their perfect home, or it was something else? I realized that many times a lot of ideas and lines of thoughts that we're discussing in the modern world came up on those stories, and I feel like I can relate to them to different things. I always thought it would be just me writing stories, me just writing blogs and nobody would read them. But one time, one friend of mine who actually read my stories decided to invite me to a conference in Amsterdam to speak about my stories. When I came to that conference, I decided to do a workshop. I don't really believe in talking. I prefer to create a conversation. So I came there preparing a workshop, and in the process, I created some sort of a visual provocation, I call it, where I used some of my photography, because I've always been a passionate amateurish photographer. I printed them with pieces of the stories and laid them down on a wall where the workshop happened. And the workshop was beautiful. I felt like I was really touching something deep with the participants and within myself. And back then on that day, I decided, okay, I have to do something bigger with that.
Mm.
That was 2 weeks before the first lockdown.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So my desire to do something with it obviously had to be pushed aside to dealing with lockdown and to focus more on regular work, which I'm thankful for. It's okay. Maybe needed some more time to cook. And then after all lockdowns were finished, I finally presented my first exhibition that is called Home Between a Shelter and a Cage.
Mm.
And from the name, you can understand that this is not just a story about belonging, it's also a story about non-belonging.
Yeah.
It's not just a story about safety, it's also about unsafety, comfort and non-comfort. So it's always looking into the shadow side of our constant search for home.
Mm. I love it because you are breaking with so many stereotypes. You also break with this danger of a single story. Most people, when they hear the word home, they are somehow prisoners of this idea of the physical house, yeah, that has to be lived with, or filled, better say, with certain participants, and this idea is very, very conservative. And nowadays, when so many people decide to change houses several times during the life, or also to move and to very, very consciously lead the life of the nomads, global nomads, this is actually nothing new. It has always existed, and still, as long as it wasn't the mainstream, it got somehow erased from the idea of what home actually means. And you know, when we had the hike in the Italy together with Roosevelt and Melina and Christian, it was really eye-opening because we were climbing the San Georg mountain, which was pretty steep for me. And over there, somewhere up, we saw, let's say, the shape of a house. We didn't really know what it was. And it really felt a little bit like, you know, like climbing towards this, let's say, ideal home, and that it takes an effort, that it's about creation, that it's about creation of this feeling and sensing of, yes, being home, as you say, with all the consequences, so also with the shadows when one arrives over there. And this guides me to the question, because we had also partly this conversation in the mountains back then. How did you actually approach it at different layers? Because you did an amazing work, also having a look not only at single stories, but at this huge underlying narratives from the philosophical point of view, and are talking about home in 5 different categories.
Dimensions. I call
Dimensions.
them dimensions, but
Yeah.
they can also be categories.
Yeah. What is the one that is, I don't know, the closest to your heart, that was really the first one that popped up for you?
The dimensions.
Yeah.
I think, as you mentioned before, when most people speak about home, they speak about the structure first, about the way they're going to create their dream home, how the kitchen would look like, what kind of furniture they're going to choose, which bed they're going to sleep on, how to make it cozy. And that's a very superficial way to look at home. That's why many people, once they build their dream home, they still feel uncomfortable. And they ask themselves, why am I not really happy? I just created myself this beautiful palace, if they're lucky enough to have the resources to create that palace. But I'm still not really happy. And that's what happened with many of the people that I interviewed for this project. First of all, I collected a lot of different perspectives from different places in the world. I am a restless nomad. I like to travel. I like to explore different places, look at different perspectives. So for me, it was really important to include a lot of different ideas and perspectives and stories to this project. And when I got those, I was like thinking, okay, So I have opinions of people of what home should look like, but I need to dig a little bit deeper. And then I went into the philosophy of home and started reading studies and books and quotes and whatever I could find that actually speak about the complexity of home. Not this romantic idea that we have of this beautiful, cozy, comfortable place with the people that we love. More about the overall picture and the different dimensions. And when I was reading this philosophy and started to develop the dimensions, I basically started from the bottom one, which is the structure. I call it configuration, to configure this idea of home and put it into practice. And then I went up to the next level. That's why I call them dimensions, because they exist in different layers. And the second one, for example, maybe I can mention other dimensions of the exhibition. The second one was affinity. And also here, there is some sort of this romantic idea that the people around you will make you feel at home and make you feel belonging. But this belonging also comes with a price. Me, for example, I am a proud member of the LGBTQ community. And I grew up in a quite conservative little town in the north of Israel. And it was not religious in any way, but it was quite conservative. Therefore, I could never feel belong in that group of people just because of my sexual orientation. Later on, I couldn't feel belong because of my political ideas or because of my skin color. In many places that I've been to around my life, I never really felt belong. I could change myself to feel belonging, but then I wouldn't be authentic. So affinity was the next dimension of what does it mean to actually feel at home? When do you in harmony with your environment? And when you have to compromise on your authenticity. The next dimension was about attachment. Attachment was written in blood. It's a result of a broken heart, basically. Attachment is the idea of relationships, romantic relationships, and how we feel at home or maybe feel dependent within a relationship that we're got ourselves into. It's a little bit different from affinity. It's a little bit different from our environment, from groups, from tribes, from religion. It's more about this little intimate cell that we create between mostly two people. I say mostly because today there's different ways of approaching relationships. And when relationship becomes an attachment, which is a negative thing, and maybe a place where you feel trapped. Many people, many times, feel trapped in a relationship. That's why the rate of divorce is really high. So that was the next, for me, the next dimension to explore. Above that, there is incarnation, I call it. Basically, what we really have, the only thing we really have is our body. And that's something that we can't really change. But again, as someone who's been living their lives with a lot of different people from different communities and many queer people, I've noticed that many people don't feel comfortable with their body. Their way of seeing themselves doesn't match with their skin. Is it gender or skin color or even age? You know, sometimes people who are 70 feel like they're 20. And they struggle with that idea that they are trapped inside a body that doesn't really represent them. But that dimension, actually, that was super interesting because I did a portrait photo shoots of people who have been actively trying to alter their skin, alter their body, shapeshift, I guess, in order to fit into what they are in their mind, what they want to become. And through those sessions of portraits, I also got to learn their stories, and they're also documented in the exhibition. The last dimension is very high up in the meta level. It's about the mind. It's about time. It's about how we perceive home from cultural perspective of from nostalgia of our past experience, how we've been taught to look at home, and how we are trying to recreate those homes again and again, even though years have passed, we have changed, society have changed, and those concepts of home don't necessarily serve us, but yet we're still stuck with them in our mind as this ideal home that we have in mind. Many of us think about their future home as something that represents their past home, this place where hopefully they felt safe and secured and protected. But though that home doesn't exist anymore. So when we think of our future home, how can we maybe disconnect from the old idea that we have of home? So I think I quite elaborated answering your question, but that was a short introduction to the 5 different dimensions. This is also still work in progress. I'm still developing the project. I'm still interviewing more people. Maybe next time we speak, they're going to be 6 dimensions or 7 dimensions. I don't know. Open to suggestions. But this is what I have so far. I am very looking forward to continue documenting more stories. I've been preparing more portraits for the next exhibition in the last few months, and it's been really fascinating to listen into more stories.
So what was the most surprising story out of this bunch you listened to just recently?
One of the most interesting stories was a trans woman. And I was very, maybe not very politically correct, but I asked that trans woman who's living in the countryside and doesn't see many people. It's a whole big story about someone who isolated herself from society and then decided to go through this transformation away from society. And I asked her, why do you wake up every morning, put makeup on, put earrings on, wearing a dress, even though you know nobody sees you? And when you do leave your house eventually and go out to the nearest village and you meet people, why is it so important to you to look like a woman? And she said, first of all, for myself, I do it because when I'm putting all of those elements, external elements, I feel more like myself. And that's fair enough. That's okay. I can do it, she can do it in many different ways, but she chooses to do it in a certain way that is very much portraying our current idea of femininity. And when she goes to the village, she say, those people, they're quite conservative. They've never seen someone like me before. If I'm not going to look like their idea of a woman, they're not going to accept me as a woman.
Yeah.
So she has to confirm into modern perception of femininity, even though from the inside, if she wants to project her inside outside, she can be something completely different. She doesn't have to go through that process of transformation, of growing her hair or putting a lipstick on. She doesn't have to go through that process. And that really made me think about the gender war that we're experiencing today. And it's mostly because we have a certain way we perceive masculinity and femininity.
Yeah.
And they can be perceived in a completely different way. They can be perceived by their quality, their emotions, their, how do I explain it more? The thing they bring inside us, rather than the thing that people see in us.
And it ascribes.
Yeah, if I think about compassion, it's a very feminine quality in a way. Women, because of their role in raising children, are much more compassionate. While men will probably have different qualities. And for me, that's masculinity or femininity, not the long hair or the short hair, not the clothes you're wearing. That's basically it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. This is also how you were describing right now, this one dimension of really feeling home in one whole body. Yeah. And then it also brings me to one more idea, because you are right now in Senegal. At the very beginning of our conversation, you mentioned that you come originally from Israel. You are on your way all the time. I have just returned from Morocco, where I had a really tremendous pleasure to meet people from the Berber tribe and also Tuareg. And there are so many nomads that, they are crossing the border between Morocco and Algeria all the time. And it's also part of the agreement that they can do it without any papers. And this is something that is not new, this living on the move. When I think also of the Jewish diaspora, it's also something like, this longing for finding home somewhere far away as well. How does this collective level of feeling home come across in your pictures, in your stories?
Funny you mentioned that. My mother keeps calling me the wandering Jew. And it made me many times think about why, in a way, I chose to move a lot and to be nomadic. Perhaps it's something that is ingrained in my genes, as my ancestors were moving all the time, or it's really like a free choice. And I wonder, I don't know. I guess it's mostly a free choice. But also when I was doing my research, and I had to conclude, I had to, in my research, in my exhibition, I'm trying not to make a stand. I'm just trying to present the two different sides of the coin, without judgment. But I also felt like I have some responsibility to come with a conclusion for the people who come to see the exhibition, but might get confused by it because it raises a lot of maybe uncomfortable insights. And when I had to think about this conclusion, the word change came up to mind. And it came after I read a beautiful piece from Martin Heidegger. Ironically, a German philosopher with Nazi past. And he was talking about home being a feeling of something that is always becoming and never really ending, which means you never really reach home. You're always in the process of becoming home. And that really associated with me, because I felt like, yes, this is exactly it. It's about constantly keeping you adaptable to change. This is what the essence of home is. It's also the essence for happiness. Happiness is a moment in life, and then it changes. And also home, this feeling of home can be a single moment when you kind of like finished beautifying your space, and then it's like, okay, so what's next? You always move, you're always changing, your environment is always changing. So how can home be something that is so static? It doesn't make any sense. And that's how I'm trying to finish my exhibition as well, by telling people, don't try to find a solution of what home is. Don't try to find utopia. It doesn't exist. It's about the process. It's about being in peace with the constant change in your life. The beauty in it. And since then, basically, I'm trying to practice that constant change. And today, which I didn't do in the past, I made a very conscious choice of being a nomad. Right now, I'm in Dakar, visiting a good friend of mine. In a month from now, I'm going to go to the Sahara on my way to Portugal, where I spend another couple of months. Then I'm going to have my exhibition in Italy, then in Sweden, then in Iceland. In between, I'm hoping to visit my family in Israel sometime. And it's a very conscious decision of accepting change. It doesn't mean I'm going to live like this forever. I think it's going to be exhausting. I also think it's something you can do when you're younger, and perhaps with time, I would feel like I have less energy to do so. but hopefully by then I will already come to terms with change. So whatever home environment I create for myself, I keep it flexible, I keep it fluid, I keep it adaptable. So whenever change is coming, and change will happen, I will take it as it comes and be completely relaxed with it. Because I think that what happens is most of the conflicts in our world is people fearing change. And find your place. And when you have your land, which is also a weird concept of owning land, but you have a land, you have a home, you have a family, you have a community, you're always scared of losing it.
Yeah.
Once you're scared of losing it. And then you basically live your life in a defensive mode of trying to protect whatever you have instead of letting go and allowing change to happen. Either it's change with your environment, changing your perception, changing other people's perception. You just need to let it happen. And change is becoming faster as we live in a hyper-connected world. Whatever used to happen in a century now happens in a couple of years. Changing in ideas, for example, they happen so fast. Changing in technology is happening so fast. So we will really have to train that muscle of adaptability to change. And I hope that once we all do it, we'll be able to also live in peace with ourselves and with each other.
You know, when I listen to you, I really love the idea of appreciating the moments of sensing home and feeling home in different corners of the world, because it doesn't have to be the physical space. It can be really this moment of just feeling right now in the right time with the right people in the right place. Yeah, we look back at very, very turbulent times, and it also is this question to all my guests of One Word Stories series. What was this one word that actually supported you and during this period, and what is the story behind?
So my word would be listening. And that's, I think, something I learned only recently. I think when I was younger, I always felt like I know better. I'm grown up enough to understand. I am confident in my opinions, in my ideas. But when I started listening, really listening to people without judgment and with compassion, I realized that I know nothing. And when you realize you don't know nothing, you're even listening deeper because you feel like there's really something you can learn from every interaction without imposing your own ideas and your own views. So now I'm really trying, whenever I come to a situation where I'm meeting someone, to keep all of my judgment aside and all of my past experience aside and really to listen. Eventually, yes, of course, I will do my own analysis and I would relate whatever I've heard to things I experienced in the past. And, that's a part of the work. But first, listening and listening from the heart with with the feminine energy of compassion we talked about before. I think femininity is a quality we need to embrace more in the world. Especially with our leaders, especially with the people who makes the tone, the politicians, the economists, the builders, all of them, they need to be a bit more feminine, a bit more compassionate, a bit more understanding, a bit softer, not just these masculine power games. And that's really what I hope for society. I think we are moving in that direction. In this case, change is unfortunately quite slow, but we're moving, and we're moving forward. Ups and downs probably, but moving forward.
Definitely, definitely. And I also love, this positive aspect of landing in our conversation. It's also, sketching this bright future, and even if the change doesn't occur with such speed as we would like to see it happen, of course, we need to always keep in mind, hey, if you want change, be the change you wish to see. Yeah.
Mhm.
So it also very, very well relates to these ideas of feeling home in different groups, in different societies, in our own body, and in the physical spaces, whatever spaces we are given or we are losing.
Yeah.
So with this in mind, Yoav, a very, very warm thank you from my side. I wish you all the best for all your projects, your workshops, of course, your exhibition, and lots of inspiring encounters that they can become also part of your project Home Between Shelter and Cage. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much, Joanna. And I hope we get to climb another mountain soon together. There's still a
Yes.
lot of things to conquer.
It's yes, it is. Thank you so much.